is the secret recipe when it comes to creating a podcast?
Genuinely just be ready to eat shit. I'm just going to start a podcast. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. And I'm just going to do that for 12 months and I'm going to see what happens. That's a disaster waiting to happen.
Why are you spending millions of dollars when you have 100,000 employees that are told that they're not allowed to share anything on LinkedIn?
Generating money from advertising is not the biggest opportunity in this space. Podcasting is not a selling mechanism. It's a mind share mechanism. Creating content without an agenda is almost the most authentic thing you can do. That's the power of story.
Yeah.
That is the power of content. That is the power of this authenticity. Social media is a load of shit. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in your business right now is your brand.
If you could go back and have your time again, what's the one piece of advice or one lesson that you learned that kind of stands out for you?
If I was a brand that was going to start a podcast, I would...
Kyle, welcome to Top of Mind. I'm really excited to be sitting here with you because your podcast was actually one of the very first podcasts that I started listening to. And I haven't said this to you yet because I wanted to save it for the podcast, but it feels like a bit of a full circle moment sitting here with you, interviewing you and getting the opportunity to pick your brain because I love the way that you set up podcasts. I love the way that you interview people. And I feel really privileged to be sitting here with you today. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. And I must say it feels a bit weird you saying that because I think the biggest, for me, one of the biggest eye-openers was that the numbers that you see, on the screen of people listening are actual people. And that still surprises me to this day. But, thank you for the kind words because I always think to myself, I hope no one really listened in the early days or no one goes back to the very beginning because it's honestly one of the things that I dread the most.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think I have closely listened to pretty much all episodes. But today I'm really excited to be talking to you specifically about podcasting, how it can be used as a marketing channel, how it can be used to create content and amplify and build a brand. And I think I'm going to start with the stats because the number of people who listen to podcasts have increased over 40 million globally in the last year. In Australia, it's up over 1 billion podcasts. And you have a podcast that sits in the top 1% worldwide. So what is the secret recipe when it comes to creating a podcast?
I've probably gone a few different ways with this, and I would say that the thing that I probably learned from, say, day one to now is that one of the most important things is authenticity. And that's probably a very stereotypical answer, but there was a period of time when I first started where I was probably not asking the questions that I would love to ask. And I was also trying to portray, or copy, people out there that are very successful in the same space. Whereas I think the second that I really just said to myself, I'm not necessarily going to get scared of the person in front of me or put them on a pedestal, but instead I'm going to be authentic to me. And what that ended up actually doing, which I think is the key insight, which was almost, I would say, very transformational for me in general, was that I feel like you can't manufacture a community. And what I mean by that is that when I took the leap into authenticity and said, I'm just going to ask these questions based on what I really want to know, and I'm not going to try to be smart. I'm not going to try to match the person in front of me act as smart as they are within their expertise. Yeah. Instead, I'm just going to act really curious, which is what I am naturally as a person. And I'm just going to ask the questions that if I was out for coffee with this person, what would I actually ask? So I think, look, that's a kind of a broad answer of what I think the secret recipe is. I think we're in an age where brands need to humanize. I don't think we connect ourselves to logos anymore. I think we connect to people. Influencer marketing probably showed us that over the last 10 years. And I think now content's really showing us that too, is that when we follow a brand, we more follow the people that are connected to that brand now. And most purchases in the world today are done because we like the brand. We have this connection to it. So I think there's probably a lot more nuance and details to that, but I think the kind of big picture here is that brands need to humanize, and content does that, and putting people at the forefront of your brand. And, that's what creators always do, but, from a brand perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And then just authenticity. Like, what is your conversation that you want to have with the world? And a podcast for me was, it was my chance to have my conversation, Like, I'm very interested in business. I love learning from smart people. I love learning about business. I love learning from people's journeys and then taking that on myself. And, I would say that for me, that's probably been the biggest thing, is that, like, I've interviewed some incredible people that I was just like, wow, I can't even believe that I've even been able to sit across from this person and pick their brain. And, I would want to do that if the cameras and mics weren't on. That's what I would love to do. So for me, it was just like that. This is my conversation with the world, and it was authentic to me. It wasn't someone else's. And that's probably what I think the secret recipe is as a broader concept.
If you've got a second and you're enjoying the episode, I would love if you could leave us a review. Yeah, and I think, talking about authenticity, I think one of the reasons we see the rise of these huge movements or fandoms or communities, you take one look at what's happened with Taylor Swift across the country in the last few months. The same again happened this week with Fred again in Sydney announcing shows. They've built this community by sharing, the authentic side of their brand. They've got this shiny, beautiful, manufactured side of their business and their brand, but then they've also got this like really authentic point of view and what they share. I think that's why, growing up, I never really had like a huge fan. I wasn't a fan of anything, right? Like I liked the bands that played, but we only had to connect with them through like a couple of channels, right? We had magazines, and then we had maybe what was on the internet at a particular time, but there wasn't this constant role of authentic content being generated. So when it comes to brands being authentic and turning up as themselves, if, for example, I'm a fashion label and I'm wanting to create a podcast, what authenticity do they have to bring to that podcast for people to go, oh, this is really interesting, because they're interested in fashion, but how do they connect with that audience that might not be used to seeing them in a podcast medium?
Yeah, I think naturally, I'll start with a concept that I think about pretty deeply, and that's this idea that you are the niche. And the reason that you are the niche as an individual, or even when we talk about the brand itself, brands in general, in my opinion, are built like humans. We're always trying to create a set of values. We're trying, and if you think about this, why would we create a set of values for our brand? Well, it's a pretty easy and simple question, is because we're trying to attract people to come and work for our brand who also share the same values.
Yeah.
And then we're also trying to attract customers that also share the same values. So naturally, the way you build a brand is actually the same way you build a human. And so for me, this whole notion that whether you're a creator, an individual, or a brand, you are the niche. And the reason you are that is because you are trying to attract similar people to either purchase or to work for you, or just to have any sort of relationship. And that's what we do as humans. We hang out with people that share the same values as us, that we care about the same things, they show the same interests. And so that's why authenticity actually matters, right? Is because if you are the niche and you're sculpting your brand or yourself in a certain way, you want to start to spend more time with those types of people. And I think when we kind of bring it back to this authenticity piece, right, I always think about it from my own perspective when I started my podcast. And I think about imagine I was doing this for someone else. And what that means is or for something that wasn't in my own interest. I probably wouldn't be that great at it, right? And I think I'll give you an example. I was running a podcast that was associated with a business in the early days. This was probably, 7 years ago. And it was a great podcast, generated a lot of business for us. I talked about things that I was really interested in. And then when I exited that business, I kind of thought to myself, like, what now? Like, what am I going to do? And the thing that I got most excited about was like, I'm just going to start a podcast. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. Yeah. There's no agenda. And I'm just going to do that for 12 months and I'm going to see what happens. And this idea that creating content without an agenda is almost the most authentic thing you can do, because you end up gravitating towards talking about things that you really love and are interested in. Yeah. And for me, I was stuck in an industry that was small and it was very narrow with the old podcast, whereas it just opened up for me. It was where I really wanted to go. And naturally, with no agenda there was no product to sell. It was just me having conversations that I just absolutely love to have. Yeah. And that just showed. And what it created was this, like, I gave myself a time period because I think that's really important, but it kind of created in me this idea that I can make progress in the direction that I want to go, and I can learn without these barriers, right? And I think that's the trick. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, what if we're a brand? What if we're a company? We are selling products." You need to take this mindset that there's no products there, because podcasting is not a selling mechanism. It's a mind share mechanism. It's there to capture the mind share of your customers. And Nike did this really well, right? 20, 30 years ago, is they never sold you a shoe. No. They told stories about athletes. And I still wear Nikes now because of Michael Jordan. Same. Sounds crazy, right? But that's the power of story. Yeah. That is the power of content. That is the power of this authenticity. And I buy because I like Michael Jordan. Yeah. That's literally the reason I buy. If I'm going to wear Adidas shoes versus Nike, I always will go to Nike because I believe in the athlete's mindset. I believe in all of these things, and I now have a connection to that brand. Or more importantly, to Michael, who is a representation of that brand. And so that, in my opinion, is where you go with podcasts, is you don't talk about your products, you don't talk about your business, you don't talk about any of that. You talk about the things that you're interested in, that your audience is also interested in. But the main thing is, what are you interested in? So if you're a fashion brand, you're going to talk about style. You're going to talk about trends. You're going to talk about, maybe it's makeup, right? Because there's a connection there. You're going to talk about news that has potentially happened. And it might not just be fashion business news. It might be like, I don't know, Lady Gaga wore this dress to, whatever awards night that she's gone to. And it's like, naturally, what ends up happening is you build this community and audience that listen to you. And the beautiful thing is that when people listen to you, they can't tell the difference between it being content or being real life, because we only know what our inputs are. And so it's almost like someone spending time with you. And then you have to really ask yourself the question, because this is the counterintuitive part of the whole thing, is that if someone's listened to you every week for an hour, for a year, the next time they have to make a decision to purchase a product within this realm or this industry, they're picking yours. And that is the counterintuitive part to this, is that your content should not sell. It should do the complete opposite. And when you try to do it from a point of selling, it's not interesting to people, because it's not talking about an interest, it's talking about a product, right? And so I think that's the really interesting part about this. So, and this is why I say you are the niche, is because when you talk about things that you're interested in, you start to attract people in that are interested in the same thing. So it's not talking about things that your customer's interested in. Yeah. You need to talk about things that you are interested in, because you are the niche, and then you'll start attracting those people. And I think, I don't know why, I think, I don't know why that is, but that's just what I've noticed.
Yeah. I think authenticity is such a funny word. And we see it all the time in
Yeah.
business, right? You know, a large part of what we do is write content for people on LinkedIn. We write content for brands. We create content for brands. And one thing we see time and time and time again is the moment we mention authenticity, people go, oh, well, I'm not telling people about my private life. And they will, I don't want to tell them everything. Like, I'm quite a private person. And I think, you know, having my own brand on Instagram and LinkedIn, I don't share everything. I share what I want people to know. But I think that there's a really fine balance between, you know, having that authentic connection. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to share your whole life with people or go into the, you know, juicy details that perhaps you wouldn't even tell your closest friends, especially as you're building a personal brand. So I suppose from a personal branding point of view, from an authentic point of view, how would you encourage people to turn up for themselves authentically without having to kind of divulge their deepest, darkest secrets?
I have this conversation a lot with clients, is that you've got to protect your space.
Absolutely.
I tell a story. I interviewed the founders of Elite 11 when we really started to take off with the podcast. And it was so eye-opening that I went to their birthday. And I reckon 70% of the party came up to me that night and had a conversation with me about the podcast. And it was super eye-opening for me in the fact that I'm like, holy shit. That was, you know how I said the numbers thing on the screen? That was the first time I was like, there was 100 people there. 75 of them come up and had a conversation with me and were telling me things that I said on the podcast.
I love that.
And I was like, like, wow, this is real, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, you got to protect space. And I think that's what I would say. I think when it comes to creating content, you got to understand what you're comfortable with sharing.
Absolutely.
And what you're not. And then you've got to find a mechanism to do that. And I think that's one of the most important things. I think a lot of people think they need to be everywhere. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think you got to find strategies and mechanisms that allow you to share what you want to share, talk about what you want to talk about, but you still have to have that authentic piece in there, right? So if I'm going to sit here and have a conversation about business, I'm not going to project that I'm anywhere that I'm not. I'm not going to project that I'm anything that I'm not. And instead, you know, for me, like the way I found that, and it's hard because you think, like, we live in a society where, you know, social media is a load of shit. Like 9 out of 10 people on that thing will lie to your face in their stories, on their posts, and that's fine. But the reality of the situation is, and what I realized for me is that whatever I choose to do, I can't be anything outside of myself, because eventually that's just a game that I don't think anyone wants to play. No. That's just on an individual level. It's not about getting found out. It's not about any of that. It's about, you know, for me, it's about your values and, you know, internally. You know, like I and there's been times where it's happened. Like naturally it happens. Like when I was younger, like you play the game. It's a zero-sum game in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So for me, it was like, I kind of sat there and said, the most authentic thing you can do is be extremely curious. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to sit here and think and project that you're smart.
With authenticity, then I think it's really important talking about, you know, amplifying a brand or a business. One thing we talk about all the time is choosing a channel that's authentic to you. You know, if you don't like recording videos, don't turn up on TikTok. If you don't like writing longer pieces of content, don't start a blog, because the thing that you're going to do more naturally is going to be the thing that you're going to do consistently, and that's the thing that's going to get you the results, is that consistency over a period of time, because you're staying top of mind. And I think that that's really important to also note from an authenticity point of view is, you know, the channels there, you being authentic as a brand or a business is so important, because at the end of the day, it comes back to people that know, like, and trust you, right? And I think that for me, you know, the difference between buying an Apple computer versus a Microsoft product or something like that is about the fact that I feel as though I know, like, and trust that brand. So talking about, I suppose, authenticity, but then channel selection as well. You've said it before that your podcast has been used as a marketing channel which generates revenue and leads for you. Now, my marketing background, I know that every single client comes to me and they go, well, what's the return on investment? I'm going to invest 30 grand to start a podcast. When can I expect to see the return on investment? How do you answer that for people and businesses?
I think a lot of people look at content creation like they look at running a Facebook ad and going, you know, my expectation is that I'm going to generate, you know, if I'm spending $1,000 on content this month, then I should generate $4,000 in revenue on the back end, and that needs to happen next month. The reality is that's not necessarily what content creation is. Content creation is a brand building mechanism. And I always think about brand, or really simple terms. Brand is making future marketing more effective. And so when you think about that, and I always, Mark Ritson, I don't know, like he's the man, but I'm a big Mark Ritson fan.
Ritson.
Yeah, I'm a big Ritson fan. And the 60-40 rule, you know, this idea that you should be spending 60% of your budget, your marketing budget on branding.
Yeah.
And the reason is because when we actually break down making future marketing more effective, you need to think about that. How do you make marketing more effective? Well, it should cost you less to acquire a customer. And that's what branding does, right? So when Nike go and do this commercial with Michael Jordan, they're not thinking about direct ROI from that advertisement. They're thinking about, how do I connect with this customer so it costs me less for them to acquire them the next time, or for them to repurchase. Because once I get them, it's a lot easier to sell more products to that one customer than it is to acquire a completely new customer. And that's really what brand building is all about. So the biggest, like we had a decision to make when the kind of journey that I went on was, I want to give myself 12 months, no strings attached, figure it out. What's the opportunity in this space? Because I knew that I could just feel that there was something happening. And you've either got really two options. You're either going to go out there and you're going to create a network, or you're going to go out there and you're going to create the railroads. And for me, the network, I played a little bit in that space first up. It's actually really funny. We brought in some talent, launched a show, completely failed, bombed. And I was like, there was a lot of lessons in that for me.
Which were?
The biggest lesson was that generating money from advertising is not the biggest opportunity in this space. And then at the same time, you've seen companies like Nelk, who, you know, were launching Happy Dad, which is now like one of the most successful seltzers in the world, on the back of their ability, on the fact that they had an audience already. Prime, Logan Paul KSI, you know, Mr. Beast, Feastables. For me, that I looked at that and I said, that is the biggest opportunity in this space. And in my head, I termed it creator commerce. This idea that content creation and commerce are on this massive collision course. And they're already colliding, but like it is only going to it's only going to get adopted more and more and more and more. And so for me, like the biggest opportunity in the space is not about generating advertising revenue, because there's one common rule with advertising is it only gets more and more expensive. So for me, it was actually more about this idea that commerce, you know, this idea that you can sell products on the back end. Of creating content, that was a huge opportunity. And I then actually went away and did some research. And I went to actually, like, I think it was either the late 1800s or the early 1900s. And this is just how my mind works, by the way. I was like, okay, like who's done what we're trying to do? And like, who would I say the biggest companies in content creation have been over the last 100 years? Because I like to look in 100-year cycles. And I went back and looked at Warner Bros, whichever one it is, but and how they grew. And so we all know them for the movies that they create, but where they actually originally started was they actually went out and bought studios all over America. And so for me, it was just around infrastructure and the fact that, okay, like I asked myself a few questions. The first one, do I think content and commerce are going to continue to collide and that this industry is going to grow and expand? And the answer, in my opinion, was yes. And the numbers also said that. So, and then the second question was, is there someone in Australia right now building the railroads for this? Like, you know, is there a good enough option for a business to go out there right now and actually create content? And my answer to that was no. And so then I was like, okay, great. Like, I'm going to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And my bet was that, and we're not there yet, right? But my bet was that I think the biggest opportunity is that brands are going to understand that content plays a massive role in brand building and their ability to make future marketing more effective. And they're going to look at the early adopters, such as Logan Paul, Kim Kardashian, all these people that have been creating content and are now building the quickest and fastest growing businesses in the world, and say, I want a piece of that too. And so I think that is the biggest opportunity for brands, is being an early adopter, creating content, humanizing your brand, building connections that you previously didn't have that are going to last a very long time and that are going to make future marketing more effective.
Which then I suppose begs to ask the question, what comes first? Like the personal brand or the community, so to speak, or the podcast? Or, you know, if you're creating content, so for example, you've got someone at the moment that doesn't have a big following, doesn't have a big community, but wants to build their personal brand, or perhaps they've got a business that they're growing. If they don't have the personal brand or the community yet, do you think, would your advice be to grow that personal brand and community first? Or would it be start the podcast and grow it that way?
I don't think you can grow a personal brand without creating content.
Yeah.
That would be my answer to that, is like, I actually don't think it's possible in the modern age. I think, you know, you think about, I'm sure if we all pulled our phones out right now, we would be disgusted by the amount of time that we spent watching content on them.
Oh, I am.
And you know, like, I don't even think I'm that bad, but it would be horrible, right?
Yeah.
So to think that is where people spend a third of their day and the other third is at work or with their families or, you know, or playing a sport or whatever it is that they do. I think that in order to build any sort of brand, whether it's a personal brand, whether it's, you know, whether you've already got an existing brand that may be large, you know, whether you're a new brand or a startup or whatever it is that you're doing, I think that in the modern age, you have to be creating content in order. And that doesn't mean it has to be video. I think video is the best opportunity right now, but you just have to be creating content in general because humans love to consume. And so I think that my answer to that would be, the reason I love podcasting is because it takes this, like for me, just personally, my own experience is like, I'm no good at talking to a camera. I'm so much better talking to a human, right? So that was just an easy tick box for me. Cool. Yeah. If I get to talk to a human instead of a camera, that's so much easier. And so I think a podcast is a really easy place to start. You know, not everyone is like the Ibi Akbars of the world and can like do these crazy skits on camera and have all these creative ideas. It's actually the complete opposite to what I am. I'm a people person. I love talking to people. I think, you know, Pivotal Conversations was built on the premise that conversations are life-changing, right? And you know, I think everybody can pinpoint a moment in their life where they had a conversation that completely changed the trajectory of their life. And so for me, a really simple thing was like, cool, what's my conversation? Podcasting is a great way to do that. And then just by having that conversation on the back end, you start to build this brand. You start to build this community as a byproduct of having the conversation. So very long-winded answer, but I think it is the idea that you need to create content to build brand. I think, I'm going to stick by that. You need to create content. There's other factors, but you do need to create content in the modern age to build any sort of brand, whether it's individual or not. So I think that's why a lot of people understand that they have to be in this space, and then it's just about finding the right mechanism.
And what if there's someone that's just starting up, for example? Like podcasts aren't cheap to do well. You know that. You've gone, years and years of podcasting, and I'm sure you've tried all of the different routes of shooting content, which microphones you prefer, which camera content, which producers work, which don't, the lighting and everything that we've got here in this beautiful studio. You obviously didn't start like this. You started in a co-working space and you tested and you learned what worked for you and what worked for your audience. So for someone just starting who potentially doesn't have a huge amount of cash to splash when it comes to producing great content, where do they start?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say is that there's two sides to this coin. And the first side is that, yep, the bells and whistles are all great and they allow you to penetrate a market by getting video content and doing whatever you want to do. But hey, I know creators that are going, like one of our clients, Danny Rance, is like going viral right now, shooting reels on his iPhone in his lounge room. He's growing 30,000 followers in like 2 months. So that tells us that as much as all this is great, it's not the only factor in growing an audience. And so another one of our clients has actually started their podcast by walking around their house talking into their phone, and has grown a podcast that, has generated over 150 reviews before they actually started with us. And the reason that, and most people would say, well, like, why would they actually start with you? And it's because that there's two sides to the coin. There's the content itself and what you talk about. And that's really important.
Absolutely.
And what we find is the podcasts that actually perform the best are the ones that are the most authentic, right? Where they're just talking about the shit that they want to talk about. And then there's the other side of it, which is then penetration and the ability to accelerate, right? And so I would actually say that the most important factor is the first, which is what you talk about. And then if you want to accelerate growth, that's when all this stuff comes in. So for me, like that's the way to think about it is you don't need to start with all the bells and whistles. You can start on your iPhone. You can start with a mic in your lounge room, and you can have success. Now, it's a sliding scale, and there's no guarantees no matter what you do. But the most important thing is refining what it is that you talk about, and that is that journey of like, okay, is this actually authentic to you? Do you actually care about it? Are you interested? Because that'll come out in your work. And then once you kind of find that space, then you can really start to accelerate growth. And create a perception as well, like if you're a creator who is just creating content for the fun of it, you can almost get away with like just your iPhone. But if you're a brand who is trying to uphold a particular perception, which is part of branding, then, it might be something that you need to consider. So I think it's different for everybody, but I just kind of keep coming back to those two pieces. It's like one's there to accelerate, but you still need to refine what it is that you talk about. Are you interested in it? Like even just being a host, like it is such a different experience, right? So refining that craft takes a bit of time. So I think my advice would be just to start however you can, wherever you are. There's no place like right now, or no time like right now, and get started however you can. And then, based on your budget, based on where you're at, make decisions that are in the best interest of you, and take those steps, and if you want to accelerate growth, then all this stuff can be really, really great. But if you're not in a position to do that, start where you can.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the pieces of advice we give to most of the clients that work with us is start with the minimum viable product, right? Like it's a huge marketing term and I fucking hate buzzwords, but MVP is like your minimum viable product. What is going to get you in front of your customer that might generate some cash flow or might generate some leads that then allows you to grow that business. And I think secondly, your point around perception comes back to what we were just talking about off air around the argument of wearing activewear at work and, how you want to be perceived. It's like, do I love living in activewear? Absolutely. Am I going to turn up to a really important client meeting in my activewear? Probably not. And I think you're right as well. It's like it depends on what you want people to take from that piece of content is how you then show up.
We've said the word authenticity. My opinion on what authenticity actually means is the ability to be yourself the ability to be yourself while accepting the consequences. And so we had this conversation around, is it okay to wear activewear to work? And the reality is there's no right or wrong answer to that.
No.
There's just a personal answer. And if my choice is that I want to wear activewear to work and I get fired, that's a choice that I made and that's the decision that I have to live with.
Yeah.
And that's what makes creators amazing, right? Like their superpower is exactly that. And it's actually the thing that is going to cause a lot of the larger brands, like these big corporates that are just so ingrained in this old way of work, this old mentality, is that we have to uphold this particular perception, right? And I totally agree. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from someone that I would consider a mentor of mine was that brand is more about defense than it is offense. And that when you create content, you need to understand that what you talk about is actually going to attract similar people.
Yeah.
So if I'm, as a business and as a brand, if we value one thing, but we start creating content about another, that's going to be a recipe that's a disaster waiting to happen. And so, but that's why when we're creating content around a brand, it's really important to about the humans that we pick to represent that, right? Like imagine I'm a brand, I need a human, right? That's why there's probably no better person than either the CEO or the founder, right? Because that person is at the pinnacle of the business. They are the best representation of the values, not all the time, but they should be.
They should be.
Right? So that's why that's the best person to do it. And people want to hear from these people these days. Like that's again why I think, if the CEO should be spending as much time talking to stakeholders and shareholders as they can. And I think like coming back to that is that authenticity is the ability to be yourself and accept the consequences. And, for the larger brands, that's the hardest thing is, a lot of the time there's a lot of red tape there. And I think it's because they're not putting the right people to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you get the CEO and you know what, it's not a bad thing if the CEO says something that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people think it's a disaster, but it's like, hey, if that person is not a true representation of the company and their true beliefs eventually come to the surface, that is a net positive long term for the company.
Absolutely.
So that's the interesting debate right now, in my opinion, is what are the companies that are too large to fail right now doing? The innovator's dilemma. It's Google, right, with AI at the moment, who, it's an absolute disaster for them right now. And it's because that there's so much red tape involved currently for these brands that are big that, it's the Netflix Blockbuster debate.
Absolutely.
Right? Why didn't Blockbuster, innovate?
Yeah.
And it's because it was sitting right in front of them.
Yeah. And I think I've noticed that over the last couple of years. Obviously, one of the pillars of our business is personal branding. We write content for executives who know that they need to be on LinkedIn, but they don't have the time to write their own content, so we write it for them. And I saw it. We serviced one of the biggest banks in Australia. We wrote a whole heap of content and rolled out a pilot program with them last year. The moment I put that up on LinkedIn and started talking about the fact that we did it with them, another top 4 bank in Australia came to me and was like, well, if they're doing it, we want to do it. And I think that it's that ability to recognize an opportunity in personal brand. I talk about it all the time. Is like, why are you spending hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars on building brand and billboards and TV commercials and radio ads and everything like this talking about your brand when you have 100,000 employees that are told that they're not allowed to share anything on LinkedIn. And it doesn't make any sense. So I think with that, is there any kind of trends that you've seen in the kind of branding or podcasting space that over the last kind of year or two, you're like, that's something to jump on from a brand opportunity point of view? Hey, thanks for listening so far. If you are enjoying this episode, I would love if you could leave us a review.
Yeah, I think the brands that are growing the quickest at the moment are the best at. This actually is really interesting, and it's something that I've noticed a lot of. But it's this idea that you build your brand around a specific personality, and that's what we talked about before with Nike and Michael. But like Elon Musk is also probably one of the absolute pinnacles in terms of this strategy. That the reason he like if you think about him on Twitter, he is like unapologetically himself, and that's why people love him. And then they build this connection to the brand. There's another one. I don't know if you follow BetR.
Yeah.
So BetR, and they've got this like skinny, scrawny guy named Derek that they've built their whole brand around. And it's like, because that's, if you think about this, and I've thought about this pretty deeply, what is BetR Derek? He is this annoying, in-your-face guy that just says, like he's so annoying. Right. And like the way he acts on camera is like fuck you, man. And he's in your face and he's so annoying and he's like that really like how does this guy have so much confidence? Blah, 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 blah. But then you go, okay, well, what's better?
Yeah.
They're coming into an industry that's been around for 100 years and they're going up against some of the biggest conglomerates in that there are. You think about the gambling space and you think about there's like 3 companies that you know the name of.
Yeah.
And then you go, who else did they sign? Who's a shareholder in that? Jake Paul, who there's a bit of a common theme here. So they're better and they've been able to grow. They're capturing market share at a really great rate. And it's because they go, this is who we are as a company. Who are the best personalities out there that completely resonate with our personality? We want to come in, we want to be that annoying kid.
Yeah.
And so they go and get Jake Paul, and then they build they build their brand around a personality through creating content around this skinny, scrawny, annoying guy, BetR Derek.
Yeah.
Right?
What a name.
Love it.
Yeah.
But like, think about it. It's so memorable.
Yeah.
And like, he is so memorable. And now I associate BetR with BetR Derek. Right?
Yeah.
And now I've got this personality that I'm associating with BetR, and I know who they are. I know what they represent. Now, are they my cup of tea? Probably not. But I'm sure the younger generation, right? Like I reckon they're attracting the Gen Xers. Is that the right? Is it Gen X?
Gen Z.
Gen Z? Yeah, Gen Z.
Gen
Gen
Z.
Gen Z.
I can't keep up. There's a new one every
so the
month.
Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're going to love that.
Yeah.
They don't really, like, you think about like Gen Z, sorry, I'm losing it, but like you think about the older generations, right? They don't want that. They want like the boring, been around for 30 years. Whereas like Gen Z, they just like, they want like, they're all got attitude. That's the one thing. If you think about Gen Z across the board, all of them young, attitude, don't care what old people think.
Yeah. They're
right?
very entitled.
So like that's a strategy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing. Like if I was a brand that was going to start a podcast, I would be finding talent to do my podcast for me that best represents our brand as personality, and then going all in on that, and I would hire them full time. So I would be paying them an amazing wage. I would, if they're big enough and they're already got a big following, I would be giving them a slice of the pie, and I would be bringing them in and building my brand around their personality. Yeah. And just that would be my all-in move.
Interesting. Is that what you're doing this year?
No comment.
Moving on. So, you talk about, I think that's a really interesting point to springboard off, is because you talk about podcasts being the gold standard for community building. They build communities, they help resonate with an audience, with the community. I think we spoke about it just a bit before, but like, you build this community and then you have to continue serving them and then you have to level up. And I think, your podcast is a beautiful example of that. You've got 200 episodes under your belt where you've interviewed some of the most incredible people. But when you get to interviewing all of the people that you've wanted to interview because that's the niche or the conversation that you wanted to have with them, you're going to get to a point where you run out of people to talk to. So where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think I just bring it back to the same set of principles. Like, just people don't listen to me because I interview people. That sounds crazy because everyone will be like,
no.
wow, like, and when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, look at me, like I'm special. I mean like they listen because I've been able to have a conversation that creates value for them.
Absolutely.
So the principle is having a conversation that creates value for them. Does that mean I have to do it with someone else? Can I follow those principles and do it myself? It just comes back, like we always talk about this thing called target value, and it's what is the value I'm trying to create and who am I trying to create it for?
Yeah.
And if I just ask myself that really simple question, I just bring myself back to, I just need to now innovate, right? Like it's this idea that if you do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So for me, it's just about, it's an honor to serve a community.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like these people literally listen to me every week.
Yeah.
And they give me an hour of their time, which is crazy because like that is so much time. And so it's an honor. And I'm truly grateful. Like I think it's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And now I don't think of it as a burden to serve that community. I think as a great opportunity. And that's why I take my time. Right? Like for me, it's not about now. I'm at a point where I probably haven't been putting out content consistently, but it's probably on the back of that, like, wow, like I'm actually really taking my time to understand how I can serve them more. And that's something that I truly deeply care about that. And so businesses face this problem. Everybody faces this problem, is that value changes. And what value is to someone changes. And so our job is to figure out what that is and truly try to create value for people. So I think that if you're going to get into this space, you just got to understand the world that you're entering. And that world is that you need to continuously create value for your community or else someone else will. Yeah. And that's just how people work. We all have 24 hours in a day, the same amount of time in a week. And so if you stop creating value for someone, they will go find that value somewhere else. Absolutely. We hunt value as humans.
Yeah.
And that's why the more loyalty you can create to your brand by continuously serving value to someone, the better chance you've got of maintaining a relationship. Yeah. And it's like, you think about it, right? Like if you've got a friend and that friend does something towards you that doesn't serve you, you're not going to be that person's friend anymore.
You don't text as often.
No.
I use that analogy all the time where it's like, if someone turns up and they say something that doesn't align with you, you're going to want to spend less time with them, right? And that happens as we get older. You have friends that start liking different things or spending time with other people that perhaps don't resonate with what you want or where you want to go. And I think you're so right. Like there's so much value in just staying aligned with the purpose that you have and showing up where that community needs you the most, as opposed to just copying suit to seeing what everyone else is doing. And, you've been in the game for a while. If you could go back, you've said you've launched things that have flopped or not made it before.
So many times.
You've, tested, trialed, all of these different ways of doing things. If you could go back and have your time again starting a podcast, you've obviously started lots of different things over and over again, which I think some of the most successful people have. What's the one piece of advice or one lesson that you learnt that kind of stands out for you that you want to share that perhaps then stops others making the same mistake?
In podcasting or content creation or just general?
Both.
I think it's like genuinely just be ready to eat shit. Like, I think a lot of people get into things. And for me, it's probably been, I could say over the last 12 months, learned that again. You know, like having my daughter, renovating a house, starting a new business. Like, I feel like I'm in this next phase of my life where I'm learning so much again. And it fucking sucks. Because, like, in order to learn, you make so many mistakes. As a father, you know, like, that's probably been one of the biggest ones for me, is like just learning about myself on another level and like having to really introspect on another level, because it's not just about me anymore.
It's not. You
know, and when you have a child, like, when you get with a partner, they're an adult. You know, like they're their own human.
Yeah.
This little bubba is like not that.
No.
They're like, you know, they're completely relying on you.
Yeah.
So I think introspection was big there, but like that's a hard thing to do. You know, in order to change is always hard. And so I think whether you're starting a podcast, a business, becoming a father, whatever it is, just be ready that if you actually want to be successful at it and you actually want to make it work, you are going to eat shit. And that shit eating period of your life,
learn to enjoy eating shit.
Yeah, but there's no time span on that.
No.
Like, I think that's probably it. I think people know they're going to eat shit, but it's like, how long can you eat shit?
For.
And just
continue.
Understand that may never end.
Yeah.
Right? And it may end and you may get good at it, but like there is no time period. It's not like, oh, I have to do this for 12 months. You might have to do this for 5 years before you actually get good at it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. Like, people might start a podcast and they quit after like episode 5. They might start a business and it gets a little bit too hard in year 1 and they're done. And so for me, it's just been like, you know, my biggest lesson, and just from completely just committing myself to things, is that even if I suck at this, I'm going to keep going until I get really good at it.
Absolutely.
And like, that's just a continuous thing. Like, there's levels to everything. Like, yes, I've had some success with my podcast, but like, man, there are people out there that make me look like an amateur. And I can learn from those people, and I'll just keep going until I eventually get to that level. And even if I don't ever get there, that's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I think that's probably the thing that I can even, like, I think we all know that deep down, but like, for me in the last 12 months, I've learned that again, and it's been so humbling and rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the mantras that I have in my head on a daily basis is if it was easy, everyone would do it. I think I remind myself of that daily when things get hard or something goes wrong, that it's just going to continue happening, and there's never going to be an end point where things don't go wrong, because that's life. Now, I want to get more into a bit more tactical side of podcasting. I think, you know, there's Spotify, there's the Apple Podcast, there's the various channels that you can be on, from Instagram to TikTok to YouTube. Do you have a preference, or do you think that there's, you know, one platform that performs better than the other when it comes to launching a podcast?
I think you have to be on all of them, because there's no negative to being on all of them, apart from, you could argue maybe YouTube is hard in terms of resources. Like, it takes quite a bit to do that well. I think you have to be on all of them because you have to meet people where they want to be. Yeah. They don't really care about your podcast. They care more about where they're listening, what's their experience. Like, if people hate Spotify, they're not going to listen to you on Spotify. And I think we've probably seen that with like Joe Rogan, and you know, he's now allowed to be back on YouTube. He's now allowed to be back on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify have said, we don't really mind where you are, but we're still going to sign a deal that keeps some sort of exclusivity towards us. But I do think YouTube is the biggest opportunity, You
Wow.
can't go viral on Spotify. You can't go viral on Apple Podcast. You can go viral on YouTube. Like we've had a few examples, but there was one example where one of our clients had achieved, I think it was about 30,000 views on YouTube for one of their episodes in about 5 to 6 days, which is cool. It's good. We made a slight adjustment to a thumbnail. 4 days later, it was at 250,000. So that just shows that like you can't do that on Spotify.
No.
You can't do that on Apple. So that's where the video comes in. That's where I think like this whole, we were talking about the bells and whistles. Although you probably don't, even saying that, I still don't think they're absolutely necessary, which sounds counterintuitive because it's a big part of my business. But I think that personally, I think YouTube's the biggest opportunity. I think it still has the most amount of watch time as a platform. It's still miles in front of TikTok, and TikTok's just gone past Instagram and all these in terms of total watch time.
Yeah.
So YouTube's still so far out in front. YouTube is, in my opinion, the new TV. A lot of people don't watch broadcast TV anymore. They want to watch things when it suits them. And it's democratized. And so I think YouTube's growing as a platform. I think it's one of the greatest business opportunities of the decade. And, even just from an investment perspective, like I think they're going to be the winner. And even when you think about AI is all built on data. YouTube has the most watch time out of all social media platforms. Video, audio, transcriptions, like even in the AI race, I think there's going to be so much that will be built on the back of YouTube. But just as someone who's creating content, if you have the resources to do it, I believe going all in on YouTube is hands down the greatest thing that you can do because of all the things I just mentioned. But what a lot of people underestimate about long-form content is when you watch a reel, you're watching 30 to 60 to 90 seconds of someone. When you watch a vlog, a podcast, you're literally spending 60 to 70x that amount of time with this person. And so, but you also get the benefit because like every vlog can turn into 5 reels, every podcast can turn into like 10 reels or 10, TikToks or whatever it is. So like, going all in on that long form piece of content and then growing that over time on a platform like YouTube that has great discoverability. Like if you can go viral on YouTube with your full episode and then double that down and go viral across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts with all of your shorts, it's just such a powerful engine in order to grow your brand. So that's where I think that personality comes in, like going away and potentially giving equity to like an up and coming influencer or creator that best represents your brand and then building a show around them, whether that's a podcast, whether that's a vlog series, like whatever it is, there's so much, and then just building content around them, like there's just so much opportunity there that I think, a lot of brands aren't tapping into, but I think it'll become pretty obvious in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean, like the brands that do it well, right? And I think the crazy stat around 99% of podcasts don't make it past episode 20, terrifying.
Yeah, but also like, man, it is so easy just to get to episode 20.
Yeah, so I think what is it that those podcasts are doing that don't make it past episode 20? Is it just the lack of effort or resources?
Name anything you did 20 times that you were good at.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Like, it's resilience. It's this ability to be consistent.
Yeah.
It's this too hard basket. And it's also like a lot of people just don't see the value in it, and I think that's where, like, honestly, if you are a startup right now, it is your biggest competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Because I can guarantee you the big businesses that have been around for 10 to 15 years in your industry, they're not doing this. And the reason they're not is because it's too hard or we don't want to spend our time on it. We don't see the value in it. When in reality, it's the most valuable thing you can do because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in your business right now is your brand. It's the connection you have with your customers. It's the connection you have with people that follow you. Yeah. And that's because it is your long-term strategy in business. It is the thing that will keep your customers coming back. Like we just talked about it before, like Was it who just got boycotted that we were talking about?
Stanley. Mugs. Yeah.
Like
the big cups.
Why is that devastating for them as a brand? Well, because now their customers are going to be like, what the fuck?
You lied to me.
You lied to me.
Yeah.
I don't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
So it's this trust factor.
Yeah.
And we trust people we spend time with because we get to know them. And the beauty of brand building, if you do it authentically, is that you can build this really trustworthy, authentic connection with an audience. And as soon as that's gone, done. Capiche. Gone. Yeah. So, I think, I just think it's so pivotal for startups especially to do this because your competitors will not be doing it.
Yeah. I think one thing you mentioned just before, and I've got a few more questions before we wrap up, but I think you talk about, if you were doing it with a big brand, you'd look at getting an influencer or a celebrity or someone that's really well known or potentially has their own platform in to create content on your behalf. But then as we just spoke about, trust is one of those things that can be gone in an instant, right? There's that old saying that trust takes years to build and a minute or a second to lose, right? How do brands navigate choosing ambassadors? And I think that's why we've seen brands be more particular around influencers and the type of people that they're working with because they can be quite volatile assets. You see Kim Kardashian go off and do her own thing now, or, someone goes off the rails and, they're attached to your brand. How do you navigate that when choosing someone to represent your business that's potentially not part of the business?
Well, no, I think that's the exact. You just said it. They need to be a part of your business.
Yeah.
Like, you need to align your incentives, and this is like something that you learn in sales. Is that in sales it's about finding a win-win, right? That's the best kind of deal, or you're willing to walk away from it, and that's the key. Is that find a win-win with someone who you think shares the same values as you, and do great work with them. And align your incentives to a point where it makes a lot of sense for them to stick around. And, if you choose the wrong person or they don't best represent your brand and your values, that'll show up at some point and that'll come back to haunt you. And I think we've all made decisions that we're not proud of, or we look back and go, fuck, why did I do that? And I think the more of those decisions that you make, the more that you learn of what it actually looks like. And I think it's okay to make a mistake. The more fatal it is, the more it's going to hurt you. And sometimes you don't come back from those. But I would say that if I was doing it, my advice to myself would be very careful. Take your time. Don't rush it. Don't jump into bed with someone that you don't know. And when you do understand if that person is the right person, align your incentives to a point where if they fuck around, it hurts them just as much as it hurts you. I think that's probably what my advice would be, is that, trial it. Don't go all in on something that, unless you actually truly understand, what you can do there. And I think, like, if you use the Bet-R example, I think Bet-R knew what they were getting themselves into with Jake Paul. And I think that's why they probably threw a big piece of equity at him, because now, instead of him going out and doing it himself, he doesn't want to do that. He's like, I can just be myself, do what I currently am doing, and I can now, get some economic value from being aligned with this company. And the beauty of it is I just have to be myself. Like, they're not going to tell me what to do. And you want to get into a relationship where you don't have to tell that person what to do.
No.
You want to get into a relationship where that person can be exactly who they are, and that directly aligns with our company. So they're kind of the best relationships, in my opinion, and you just need to be really careful about who you do that with. That doesn't mean you can't go out and trial different relationships and you just do a little bit here and there. But when you find that person and you go, yep, I know they're the one, that's when you can really align your incentives. And I think, with podcasting, a lot of brands are scared to do that. But it's probably just because they're not doing the due diligence that's necessary in order to do it successfully.
I think, like, the last question I have on that then is, a large part, as I said, of what we do is around building personal brands and teaching people and organizations how to, you know, get their team to start creating content for their on their behalf and things like that. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we hear from employers is, oh, what if my team say something stupid? And for me, the first piece of advice I give to them is, well, you've hired the wrong person. It's got nothing to do with the fact that you're trusting them to create content for you online. Because if I trust my team to post content about our business online, because I know that I've hired people that are intrinsically connected to the values that we have as an organisation. How would you navigate that? You've got a business, you know, you've got obviously people working within your organisation. When it comes to creating content on behalf of the business, how do you trust your team to say things that align to your business?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get into this a lot of people rush their way into this. You know, they're like, they just pick the next, you know, they might get their assistant or they might get, you know, someone who's not qualified and trained who, you know, isn't putting in the work to understand the brand. Like, if you're going to get someone to create content for you, obviously they need to understand your brand deeply, and whether that's personal, business, whatever it is. And then I think, like, we're in a world where I think that's going to change a lot. You know, like, it's so, like, we're implementing systems into our business at the moment where we can literally learn everything about an individual in 5 hours. And that sounds crazy. But, like, when you understand what you need to look for, AI is creating a world where it is so easy to fundamentally learn about an individual. And what AI does is it amplifies personalization. So this idea that a great product, in my opinion, follows 3 key steps. The first step is it becomes more convenient. The second step is it becomes more affordable. The third step is it gets personalized. And how do you personalize something? Well, you take an individual's data set, no matter what it is, whether you're in banking, whatever product you serve to your customer, it's about taking the data that you can, and data is the most important thing, and then personalizing their experience using that data. And so if you're writing content for your boss or whatever it is, or, you know, you're writing content on behalf of someone, your job is to understand their data and then personalize the experience for them using that data. But the key word is data. So, sorry, we'll cut that out. The key word is data. And so my advice is there is so many tools that you can use to do that. And AI is going to make that a lot easier, but it's no different. It just accelerates the fact that you need to know this person so deeply and then be able to write content on behalf of them using that data. Now, how you do that, that's strategy. But that would be my advice, is like follow that chain, that thought, that concept of like deeply understanding someone, deeply understanding their data, doing the research there, and then you hand that over to someone. And then if more importantly, if you're trying to get someone in your team to write content about you, the best thing that you can do is hand them a set of like data. Now that data could be stories, it could be essays, it could be research, it could be articles you've written, it could be podcasts that you've done, whatever it is, that's your data. How do you use that to train this person how to write content on behalf of you?
Yeah, and I think it's exactly the same as, you know, with businesses trusting their teams to post for themselves. You know, they have to understand what the business is about. They have to understand the values that are intrinsically linked to the business, because the moment somebody does, it stops them in their tracks when they're like, oh, actually, this isn't what the company represents, or doesn't align with what the company, you know, would normally talk about or whatever. And I think I always use that as a triage point for brands, right? Is instead of going, I'm not going to post this, go, does this link intrinsically to what the brand would post about? or what my founder would post about or what my boss might post about. And if you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud, don't post about it.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, it doesn't have to start with full autonomy. I think, you know, it can start with setting up, you know, systems where there is review, there is reviewing of content,
Absolutely.
there is, you know, meetings that are built around like, okay, let's debrief about, you know, the content and so on. So I think it doesn't, you know, you don't have to have perfectionism from the beginning, and that's a two-way relationship between the brand and the people creating the content or writing the content. So I think, you know, be willing to learn, be willing to adapt, be willing to make progress and learn from your mistakes potentially. And that's what a growth mindset really is. And I think that's fundamentally what brand building is all about. It's about having a growth mindset, taking in data, learning from that, and then making some decisions of, okay, what do we really want to stand for, and how do we create that perception with our actions, behaviours and discussions that we have with, you know, all stakeholders, all people that are interested in our brand. So yeah, I don't think it has to, from day one, it doesn't have to be perfectionism. I think it's probably the wrong way to do it. But I think as time goes by, you definitely want to have someone there who, you know, can learn about your brand and deeply understand it.
I love it. Now we'll wrap up, but where is the future of podcasting? If someone, I mean, you're one of our first episodes, but if someone's getting stuck into podcasting, what should they be looking out for? What is it that they should be, you know, investing in? Where is that channel going? It's evolved so much in the last 5 years, let alone 10, 15 years. What should they be looking out for? Where's the future of this channel going?
I think it's just more of what we're doing now, really. Like, I think the game is still the same. It's like, just get started. I just think in general, the worlds of content and commerce are colliding. Is it always going to be podcasting? I can't say that. You know, do I think it'll be around for a while? Yes. But I think just in general, brands need to create content.
Yeah.
And so I think the future of podcasting is more of it. I think we'll consume more than we ever have. I think that'll continue. And then I just think that, you know, for a brand, if you're not currently creating content, I think a podcast is a really easy way to do that and start. And then you also need to build out a lot of other channels. It's not that podcasting is all you should do, definitely not. But, you know, I think the future of it is this world of democratized media where, you know, the iPhone has done this for us. It's given everybody the opportunity to create content. We live in an economy that's literally all about attention. Those who can generate the most amount of attention will create the most amount of economic value. Yeah. Now, if you're creating a podcast and you want to spend your time in it, doing it and doing it well, then I think it's just about starting, keep it going, learn, and do it long enough that you give yourself the ability to learn, you know. And I think that's that episode, you know, 20 episodes thing, right? It's like, just literally get past episode 20 and then you'll just watch yourself blossom and grow. And then I just think, you know, a lot of brands are going to come into this space. I think you'll see the last ones that come into it are going to be the biggest and largest brands, you know, and then the ones that are innovative and forward thinking and can kind of see the trend will create content first. And so I think we're just going to see that we're going to see a point in time where brands that don't create content die, and brands that are creating content and staying relevant in their customers' minds will live on. And that's not it's not a short thing, it's a long thing. It's not like, oh, if you're not creating content in the next year, you're going nowhere. It's not that kind of thing. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. You know, so I think we'll see that over a long period of time. And I think like in 20 to 30 years' time, like, this is my pure belief, is that this is a big call.
Say it.
I've never said it.
Say it.
But I don't think teams exist. I don't think teams exist. I think you're your own individual brand. You can build whatever you want because AI and the convergence of all technology is going to mean that. And I don't think teams exist. I think there'll be literally individuals with a branch of different products and economic value that they create for people. And I think in that world, attention really matters. Because it's like, you think about it, the byproduct of smaller teams is more businesses.
Absolutely.
And that means a greater fight on attention. So I think we can already see that the world's heading in that way if you look at the data, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see if it plays out. Could be wrong. Hold me to it.
We'll check back in 20 years' time.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up.
Absolutely, 20 years. Hopefully we'll be past the 20 episodes at that point.
One a year.
Yeah, one a year and I'll be good to go. We'll do a wrap-up at 21.
Top 99%.
Yeah. Now to finish this off, I'm going to do some last questions that I'm going to ask everybody. And the first question is, what is one brand that first comes top of mind? I think I know this based on the person.
What do you think? What do you think mine is?
I think you'd say Nike. Or Country Road. I know your love for both brands.
Derek, baby.
Oh, Derek.
I look, at the moment, probably, yeah, I mean, probably better. Like, I'm actually not a massive gambler, like barely at all. But I just love watching him annoy people.
Absolutely.
Probably them. I'll give you a few. Like, I reckon probably them. Who's front of mind at the moment? Yeah, like Happy Dad.
Yeah.
Now, like Prime. Like, I really love these businesses that are content first.
Yeah.
You know, economic value second. So a lot of those are probably the first ones that come to mind. I'm a massive Kimmy K fan. I always get roasted for that, but you know, a lot of people are like, "How can you?" I'm like, man, I just respect that she's done what she's done.
Agreed. I'm right there with you. I think. Would you say then that those brands are also kind of one to watch?
Oh yeah, like we're already watching them.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about it. Like, you know, that's a Kimmy K with Skims is a $4 billion valuation. Like, now does that mean I agree with everything she says? No.
Or does?
Like, I don't agree with everything she says. I just respect the brand, and
Absolutely.
I think I respect the hustle, you know? So, yeah, they're probably the ones.
Okay. Amazing.
Top of mind. I'm sure there's others, but.
What is one thing, just one, that you think helps keep a business or a brand top of mind?
Can't be boring. I think that's one of the toughest things.
Don't be basic.
Yeah, but like, I'm a basic. I'm boring. I don't think but I'm also not one of the best attention generators on the planet. You know, like, I think you've got to be entertaining in some way, shape, or form. You know who's doing really well at the moment, who I am always so impressed with, is Daniel Gorringe. I don't know if a lot of people might know him, but I think, you know, I really respect what he does because he's so funny. I love his stuff, but I think I can also see that behind the scenes, there's probably a bit of a business brain there. Yeah. So for me, I think it's like, you just got to be entertaining in a way. And, you know, it's a challenge for me personally. Like, I think I don't know. I think it's a challenge. I think brands are got to find ways to be entertaining or deliver some sort of value. And that can be highly educational.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge for people that want to create content, because if you are super, super boring, it's going to be hard. So you got to find the arena that you are not boring in. Like, if you're funny, go be funny. Yeah. If you're smart, go be smart. Like, if you can have a deep conversation, go have a deep conversation. Yeah. Just find that arena. Yeah. Because that's where you'll be the most entertaining.
Amazing. Last question, and because I'm such a quote fiend, I love quotes. I have been told many a times that I should write a coffee table book with all of the quotes that I do share. Yeah. And I want to build on it, but with other people's favourite quotes. So do you have a quote that's top of mind?
The one thing that I absolutely have lived my life by is Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena. So the idea that it's not the critic who counts, but it's those that are in the arena, shedding blood, sweat and tears. And the idea that, you know, anyone can throw stones when they're not doing anything. And I just believe that putting yourself in the arena is the best thing that you can do as an individual, because you will grow, you will build experience, and eventually experience is literally all that matters. And so you may suck for 10 years, you may suck for 20. And even if you suck for those full 20, there will still be someone who can learn from you and will tap you on the shoulder. Like, the most valuable person in the room is the person who's gone bankrupt, because they can tell you everything that not to do. So, yeah, I think being in the arena, that's the one thing that comes to mind. Theodore Roosevelt, absolutely love it. I've got it. I literally have it printed out on a canvas in my office at home.
I love it.
Just to remind myself that, hey, if you're in the arena, you're doing okay. Because a lot of people choose not to be in the arena.
Absolutely.
And they're the ones who throw stones.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's the one that is top of mind for me.
I love it. Consider it in the coffee book. Thank you so much, Kyle. It has honestly been so nice to sit down with you. I think it's still very much a bit of a pinch me moment, because I think, as I said, you know, a few years ago, I'm sitting listening to you whilst I'm driving home from work in a job that I hated, thinking about what I could do for myself and, you know, where the next 3 to 5 years would take me. But I love your insights. I love the conversations that we have offline and what we've had here today. And I'm sure so many people can take so much out of this. I know I have, from a podcasting point of view. We're learning, we're testing, we're figuring it out. But I really appreciate your time, so thank you.
The fact that you say that still absolutely freaks me out, by the way. And I don't think that feeling will ever go away. But no, a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And it was good to be on the other side of the mic for once.
One last thing from me. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love if you could leave us a review or hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching this podcast.